In a glittering office party, a cruel voice laughs at the janitor. He keeps his head down until the CEO's daughter steps forward, kisses him on the cheek, and the whole room freezes. Respect battles status. Whispers turn to wildfire. A powerful father demands distance. An ambitious executive smells blood and spreads a rumor that could end 2 careers. But there's a hidden truth. The janitor carries a quiet gift that can move hearts, and the daughter holds a promise her late mother made about seeing real worth. The building will choose sides. Reputations, jobs, and a company's soul hang in the balance. What pushed her to defy the room, and what's inside his worn notebook that could change everything. When one brave kiss sparks a war between pride and dignity, will truth rise, or will power and lies win? The early morning sun filtered through the towering glass windows of Worthington Corporate Towers, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floor. Sam Carter gripped his mop with weathered hands, methodically working his way across the expansive lobby. His faded blue uniform, though clean and pressed, hung loosely on his thin frame. The automatic doors whooshed open and closed as employees streamed in for another workday. The click-clack of expensive shoes echoed through the space, along with the rustling of designer suits and the electronic chimes of smartphones. Sam kept his head down, focusing on the rhythmic movement of his mop across the floor. "Watch it!" A sharp voice cut through the ambient noise as a young executive in a tailored charcoal suit sidestepped Sam's mop bucket. The man didn't even look at Sam as he hurried past, already deep in conversation on his Bluetooth earpiece. Sam quietly pulled his bucket closer to the wall, making himself as invisible as possible. After 15 years of working here, he had mastered the art of becoming part of the background, like the potted plants or the security cameras. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the building's cafe, mixing with expensive perfumes and colognes that trailed behind the passing employees. At the security desk, 2 receptionists chatted while applying fresh lipstick, their laughter carrying across the marble expanse. Sam remembered when Martha, his late wife, used to laugh like that, free and unencumbered. The memory brought a slight smile to his face as he continued his work. "Did you see the new Tesla in Mr. Worthington's parking spot?" A young woman in stilettos asked her colleague as they crossed the lobby. "Must be nice to make that kind of money." "And, speaking of money," her friend replied, "I heard the board approved another bonus package for the executive team." Sam dipped his mop in the bucket, wringing it out carefully. The bonus they were discussing probably amounted to more than he'd make in 10 years. But he refused to let bitterness take root in his heart. Martha had always told him that dignity wasn't measured in dollars. The morning rush peaked as 9 o'clock approached. Sam worked his way toward the central seating area, where leather chairs and sleek coffee tables provided a waiting area for visitors. A group of young executives had gathered there, their voices carrying louder than necessary. "Johnson's presentation was a disaster," one of them said, adjusting his silk tie. "He looked as polished as this janitor here." The group snickered, casting dismissive glances in Sam's direction. Sam kept his eyes on his work, though his shoulders tensed slightly. He'd heard worse over the years. The words stung less than they used to, but they still left their mark. "Speaking of polish," another executive chimed in, his voice dripping with mockery. "Check out those shoes." He pointed at Sam's worn work boots, barely visible beneath his baggy uniform pants. The group's laughter grew louder, drawing attention from others in the lobby. Sam's cheeks burned, but he continued mopping, trying to make himself even smaller, even more invisible. "I bet he goes home to an empty apartment," one of them sneered. "Probably talks to his mop for company." Sam's grip tightened on the mop handle. They didn't know how close to home that particular barb had hit. Since losing Martha and their daughter Sarah in the accident 5 years ago, loneliness had been his constant companion, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing his pain. "Hey, Roberts," the first executive called out to his colleague, "would you let your sister date him?" This brought another round of cruel laughter. "Are you kidding?" Roberts replied, straightening his designer jacket. "No woman would touch that janitor." The words rang out across the lobby, followed by echoing laughter that seemed to bounce off every polished surface. Other employees turned to look, some joining in the laughter, others averting their eyes in uncomfortable silence. Sam stared down at his mop, watching as a drop of water fell from its fibers onto the marble floor. He swallowed hard, fighting back the lump in his throat. Martha's voice echoed in his memory. "You're worth more than their words, Sam. Don't let them steal your dignity." The laughter continued to swirl around him as he gripped his mop tighter, his calloused hands steady despite the storm of emotions in his chest. Years of practice helped him keep his face neutral, even as his heart ached with each cruel chuckle. He focused on the simple back-and-forth motion of the mop, finding solace in the routine he'd performed countless times before. The marble floor reflected the morning sunlight, showing Sam's own distorted image, a solitary figure in a sea of expensive suits and polished shoes. He could see himself as they saw him, just a janitor, invisible until they needed someone to mock, a prop in their daily entertainment. But even as he absorbed their ridicule, Sam held on to something they couldn't see. The worn notebook in his back pocket, filled with poetry he wrote during lunch breaks. The thank you card from the night shift security guard whose daughter he'd helped with homework, the memory of Martha telling him his gentle spirit was worth more than all the wealth in this building. Still, their laughter echoed in his ears as he looked down at his mop, swallowing his pride and continuing his work in silence. The grand ballroom of Worthington Corporate Towers sparkled under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Circular tables draped in cream-colored linens filled the space, each one set with fine china and polished silverware that caught the light. The gentle music from a string quartet in the corner mixed with the cheerful chatter of well-dressed executives enjoying their evening. Sam Carter moved quietly along the edges of the room, collecting discarded cocktail napkins and empty glasses on his cart. The servers bustled past him with trays of hors d'oeuvres, barely acknowledging his presence. His work uniform stood in stark contrast to the sea of designer evening wear that filled the room. The pleasant aroma of grilled salmon and roasted vegetables wafted from the kitchen doors. Sam's stomach growled softly. He hadn't eaten since his simple lunch of peanut butter sandwiches hours ago. He kept his eyes focused on his task, careful not to disturb the guests as he worked. "Oh, look, our favorite janitor is here," the loud voice carried across the room, coming from a group of young executives gathered near the bar. Sam recognized the speaker as Chad Morton, the same man who had mocked him in the lobby that morning. Chad's perfectly white teeth gleamed as he grinned, raising his champagne glass. "Still looking for that special someone, buddy?" Chad called out, his words slightly slurred. His companions snickered, their expensive watches glinting as they lifted their drinks. "Though I stand by what I said this morning, no woman would touch him with a 10-foot pole." The laughter spread through the nearby tables. Sam's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the handle of his cart, his knuckles turning white. The room suddenly felt too warm, too bright, and much too loud. "I mean, look at him," Chad continued, encouraged by his audience. "That pathetic uniform, those worn-out shoes, probably lives in some dump on the wrong side of town. Who'd want that?" More laughter rippled through the crowd. Some guests had the decency to look uncomfortable, but none spoke up. Sam's chest tightened as he felt dozens of eyes on him. He wanted to disappear, to sink into the plush carpet beneath his feet. "Hey, janitor!" Chad raised his voice even louder. "Do you even own a proper suit? Or do you just sleep in that uniform?" Sam's shoulders hunched as he tried to make himself smaller. The cart suddenly felt like the only thing keeping him upright as the room spun slightly. The crystal glasses on his cart clinked together, betraying his shaking hands. The sound of determined footsteps cut through the cruel laughter. The crowd parted as Emma Worthington made her way across the ballroom floor. Her emerald evening gown caught the light as she moved, her presence commanding attention. Her brown eyes blazed with purpose as she approached Sam. Without hesitation, Emma reached up and placed a gentle hand on Sam's weathered cheek. The room fell silent as she stood on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to his other cheek. The gesture was gentle, deliberate, and filled with compassion. Sam stood frozen, his eyes wide with surprise. The warmth of her kiss lingered on his cheek as he stared at the CEO's daughter, unable to process what had just happened. The cart forgotten, his arms hung limply at his sides. Emma turned to face the crowd, her voice clear and strong in the stunned silence. "Respect is not measured in suits or titles." Her words rang through the ballroom, heavy with conviction. She stood tall beside Sam, her presence both a shield and a statement. The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was the gentle tinkling of the chandeliers above. Chad Morton's face had turned an interesting shade of red as he lowered his champagne glass. The other executives in his group suddenly found the floor incredibly interesting. Emma's perfume, a subtle mix of jasmine and vanilla, drifted up to Sam's nose. She remained by his side, her head held high, as the entire room watched in absolute silence. The cruel laughter that had filled the space moments before had evaporated, replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet. Sam could feel the warmth radiating from Emma's presence beside him, a stark contrast to the cold isolation he had felt just moments before. His cheek still tingled where her lips had touched, a gentle reminder that someone important, had seen him as worthy of dignity and respect. The chandeliers continued to sparkle overhead, their light catching the tears that had begun to well up in Sam's eyes. He blinked them back quickly, but not before Emma noticed. She gave him a small, reassuring smile, her eyes full of kindness and understanding. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Worthington corporate towers, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Sam Carter worked methodically on the stairwell railing, his cleaning cloth moving in slow circles over the brass. The familiar scent of lemon cleaner filled his nostrils as he focused on his task, trying to ignore the constant whispers that floated around him. "Did you hear what happened at the banquet?" A woman in heels clicked past on the stairs above him. "Emma Worthington actually kissed the janitor." "I was there," her companion replied. "Right on the cheek, in front of everyone." Her father looked like he was going to explode. Sam's hand paused briefly on the railing before continuing its circular motion. He kept his head down, but his ears caught every word. "She's always been different," someone else chimed in from the landing below. "Remember when she insisted on eating lunch with the cafeteria staff?" "Different is one thing, but this is career suicide," a man's voice responded. The board members were there. What was she thinking? The voices faded as the employees dispersed to their offices, but new ones soon took their place. All morning it was the same, snippets of conversation, judgment, and speculation following Sam wherever he went. In the third-floor corridor, two junior executives lowered their voices as they passed, but not enough. "Poor Emma," one said. "She's got a savior complex or something, trying to rescue the help. Maybe she's rebelling against Daddy," the other laughed. "Dating the janitor would certainly do it." Sam's cheeks burned as he moved his cart to the next floor. He hadn't asked for any of this attention. For years, he'd done his job quietly, invisibly. Now he felt eyes on him everywhere he went. Some curious, some sneering, a few even sympathetic. Near the water cooler, he heard admiration in some voices. "It took guts," a young secretary was saying. "Those jerks needed to be put in their place." "Emma's always stood up for what's right," her friend agreed. "Remember when she stopped them from firing old Mrs. Jenkins from accounting?" In the copy room, the tone was less charitable. "It's inappropriate," a manager declared. "There are boundaries in professional settings. Mr. Worthington needs to have a serious talk with his daughter." By lunchtime, Sam's shoulders ached from tension as much as work. He'd never felt more conscious of his worn uniform, his calloused hands, the distance between himself and the corporate world that surrounded him. Miss Worthington's kindness, meant to defend him, had somehow made that distance feel even greater. He retreated to the break room during his usual lunch hour, when most employees were out at trendy cafes or gathered in the executive dining room. The small room with its humming vending machines and coffee-stained counter felt like a sanctuary. Here at least he could eat his sandwich in peace. The door opened, and Sam's heart skipped when Emma Worthington walked in. She wore a navy blue dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, but her smile was warm and unpretentious. She closed the door behind her, muffling the office noise outside. "Mr. Carter," she said softly. "I've been hoping to find you." Sam started to stand, but she waved him back down. "Please, stay seated. May I join you?" He nodded, unable to find words as she pulled out the chair across from him. Up close, he could see the kind eyes that reminded him of his late wife's eyes that looked at people, really looked at them. "I want you to know something," Emma began, folding her hands on the table. "What I did last night, it wasn't out of pity." Sam shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Miss Worthington, you don't need to explain. I know you were just being kind, trying to help." "No," she interrupted gently but firmly. "It was about respect. The respect you deserve, that everyone deserves, regardless of their job title or the clothes they wear." She paused, a distant look crossing her face. "My mother used to tell me something before she passed away. She said, 'True greatness wears humility.' I've never forgotten that." Sam sat very still, his half-eaten sandwich forgotten on its paper wrapper. Emma continued, her voice soft but clear. "I see it in you, Mr. Carter, the quiet dignity you bring to your work. The way you help others without expecting recognition, like when you stayed late to clean up after Tommy in accounting spilled coffee all over his presentation papers, or how you always make sure there's fresh water in the plant on Mrs. Peterson's desk because you know she forgets." Sam looked down at his hands, rough from years of work. He hadn't known anyone notice those small gestures. "My mother would have seen it too," Emma said. "The kind of greatness that doesn't need fancy titles or corner offices to prove its worth." The break room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the vending machines. Sam felt something shift inside him, not quite hope, not quite belief, but perhaps the beginning of both. Still, doubt crept in around the edges. "Miss Worthington," he said carefully, "people are talking. About you, about last night. I don't want to cause any trouble." "Let them talk," Emma replied with quiet conviction. "Sometimes doing the right thing means facing disapproval. That's another lesson my mother taught me." Sam sat there, turning her words over in his mind. Part of him wanted to believe in the respect she spoke of, in this vision of worth that went beyond job titles and social status. But years of being invisible, of learning to expect nothing more than the bare minimum of acknowledgement, had built walls that one act of kindness, even one as public and powerful as last night's, couldn't immediately break down. Emma seemed to sense his uncertainty. She didn't press further, didn't try to convince him. Instead, she simply sat with him in companionable silence, sharing the same space, breathing the same air. In that moment, the break room felt less like a refuge from the world above and more like a bridge between their two very different lives. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Worthington Corporate Tower's top floor. Emma's heels clicked against the marble as she approached her father's office, her heart beating a little faster with each step. The secretary nodded and buzzed her in without a word. Richard Worthington's office was a testament to power. Dark mahogany paneling, leather-bound books lining built-in shelves, and a desk that seemed to stretch for miles. Her father stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the city below. "Close the door, Emma," he said without turning around. She did as told, then settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. The leather creaked softly beneath her. "I assume you know why I've called you here." His voice was controlled, measured, the tone he used when addressing difficult shareholders. "I can guess," Emma replied, keeping her voice steady. He finally turned to face her, moving to sit behind his desk. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and his steel-gray eyes fixed on her with familiar intensity. "What were you thinking? Kissing a janitor in front of the entire company?" "I was thinking about basic human dignity, Dad." Emma sat straighter, smoothing her skirt. "Those executives were being cruel, and someone needed to stand up to them." "Stand up to them?" He leaned forward, pressing his fingertips together. "Emma, there are proper channels for addressing workplace conduct. Making a spectacle of yourself isn't one of them." "A spectacle?" Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Is that what showing kindness is called now?" Her father sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Sweetheart, you don't understand the position you've put me in. The board members are talking. Shareholders are asking questions. Your reputation—" "My reputation?" Emma cut in. "What about Sam's reputation? What about how he's treated every single day? Samuel Carter is an employee who performs his designated duties. He's paid fairly for his work." Emma shook her head, disappointment settling in her chest. Mom would have understood. She always said, "Don't." Her father's voice sharpened. "Don't bring your mother into this." The silence that followed felt heavy, weighted with unspoken words. Through the window, clouds drifted across the sun, momentarily dimming the office. "The company has an image to maintain," her father continued, his tone softening slightly. "You're not just anyone, Emma. You're a Worthington. Everything you do reflects on this company, on our family name. And what does it say about our family name when we allow people to be humiliated, when we value status over character?" Her father's jaw tightened. "This isn't about morality. It's about business, about maintaining professional boundaries." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I need you to distance yourself from this situation. No more public displays, no more special attention to Carter. Let things return to normal." Emma stood slowly, smoothing her blazer. "Normal?" She met his gaze steadily. "Normal is what allowed those executives to think they could mock a man just because of his job. Normal is what makes people like Sam invisible." "Emma, I respect you, Dad. I always have. But I won't apologize for showing kindness to someone who deserves it." She turned and walked to the door, her hand resting on the handle. From 27 floors up, her father's office offered a perfect view of the city. She paused, watching the tiny figures moving below, each one carrying their own stories, their own dignity. Moving to the elevator, Emma pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors opened on the ground floor, she caught sight of Sam through the glass partition. He was sweeping near the reception desk, his movements steady and practiced. Watching him from afar, she felt the weight of her father's words press against her chest. Sam worked with quiet focus, seemingly unaware of the storm his presence had stirred up in the corporate heights above. His uniform might be faded, but he wore it with a dignity that no designer suit could match. Emma stood there, troubled by her father's warning, but more certain than ever that she'd done the right thing. The lobby buzzed with late afternoon activity, people rushing to meetings, delivery personnel coming and going, phones ringing at the reception desk. Through it all, Sam maintained his steady rhythm, making order out of chaos, invisible to most but no longer to her. Emma watched him work, her heart heavy with the conflict between duty and conscience, but her spirit resolute. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But watching Sam's quiet dignity in the face of it all only strengthened her determination. Some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost. The morning dew still clung to the grass in the company's courtyard when Emma stepped out of the building's glass doors, carefully balancing 2 steaming cups of coffee. The early spring air felt crisp and clean, a welcome change from the stuffiness inside. She had watched from her office window, waiting for Sam to take his usual morning break. Sam sat alone on his favorite wooden bench, the one partially hidden behind a flowering cherry tree. His weathered hands held a worn paperback book, though his eyes weren't moving across the pages. He seemed lost in thought, shoulders slightly slumped under his gray uniform. "Good morning, Sam," Emma said softly, not wanting to startle him. "I brought you some coffee." He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Miss Worthington, you shouldn't." "It's Emma, please." She held out one of the cups. "And I wanted to." Sam hesitated before accepting the coffee, his calloused fingers careful not to brush against hers. "Thank you, miss." "Emma." She settled beside him on the bench, smoothing her navy pencil skirt. A gentle breeze carried cherry blossoms past them, and birds chirped cheerfully in the trees overhead. Office workers crossed the courtyard, some alone, others in small groups. Many stared or whispered as they passed. "What are you reading?" Emma asked, nodding toward the book in his lap. Sam's cheeks colored slightly. "Just some poetry. Robert Frost. The Road Not Taken was my mother's favorite." Emma took a sip of her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "Mine too," Sam said quietly, then added, "My Sarah loved poetry." Emma noticed the past tense, the way his voice caught slightly on the name. She waited, giving him space to continue if he wanted to. Sam stared into his coffee cup, as if finding courage in its depths. "We met in high school. She was the smartest girl in class, always had her nose in a book. Don't know what she saw in me, but—" A small smile touched his lips. "We married right after graduation." 2 young executives walked past, their conversation dropping to whispers as they looked at the unlikely pair on the bench. Emma didn't even glance their way. "She was a teacher," Sam continued, his voice growing softer. "Third grade, the kids adored her. We had our daughter, Lisa, and everything was." He swallowed hard. Perfect, until it wasn't. Emma's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but sensed he needed to get the words out. "Cancer took Sarah when Lisa was only 12. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. "I did my best to raise Lisa alone. She was so much like her mother, bright, kind, always helping others." A robin landed nearby, pecking at the grass. Sam watched it for a moment before speaking again. "Lisa made it through college, became a nurse. She had her mother's caring heart." Pride mixed with sorrow in his voice. "Then, 3 years ago, there was a pileup on the highway. She was trying to help someone trapped in their car when..." He fell silent. Emma felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sam," she whispered. He nodded, taking a shaky breath. "After that, I couldn't stay at my old job. Too many memories. I found peace in simple work, keeping things clean, orderly, making things a little better, even if nobody notices." He gave a small shrug. "Some folks look down on janitors, but there's dignity in honest work. Sarah taught me that." Emma thought about the executives who'd mocked him, about her father's dismissive words. They had no idea of the depth of character, the quiet strength sitting beside her. "My mother used to say that true courage isn't about being fearless," Emma said gently. "It's about carrying on with grace even when your heart is breaking." Sam looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. They sat in comfortable silence as the morning bustle continued around them, sharing the simple comfort of coffee and companionship while the cherry blossoms danced on the spring breeze. The coffee had grown cold in their cups when Sam finally spoke again. "Your kindness, it reminds me of them, Sarah and Lisa." His voice was rough with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, Emma, really seeing me." Around them, the workday was in full swing. People hurried past with their phones and laptops, caught up in their important meetings and deadlines. But on that bench, in that moment, two souls connected through shared understanding of loss and the quiet dignity of carrying on. The evening sun cast long shadows through the glass windows of Worthington corporate towers as Emma gathered her things to leave. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she walked toward the elevator, the sound echoing in the emptying hallway. Just as she reached for the button, voices drifted from around the corner. "Did you see her with him again today?" A woman's voice dripped with disdain. "Sitting on that bench like they were best friends." "The janitor's girlfriend," another voice sneered, followed by muffled laughter. "Wonder what Daddy thinks about his princess slumming it?" Emma's hand froze midair. Heat crept up her neck as more laughter echoed down the corridor. "I heard she brought him coffee this morning," a third voice chimed in, "like he's some kind of charity case." "Maybe she's going through a rebellious phase," the first voice suggested. "You know, trying to prove something to her father." Emma's chest tightened. She recognized the voices. Sarah from marketing, Melissa from accounting, and Jennifer from HR. Women who smiled at her in meetings, who'd invited her to lunch just last week. The elevator dinged, and Emma stepped inside quickly before they could spot her. As the doors closed, she caught one last snippet. Well, there goes her reputation. The ride down to the parking garage felt endless. Emma stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls, seeing herself through their eyes. Her designer blazer, her perfectly styled hair, her manicured nails, all the trappings of privilege that suddenly felt like a cage. The drive home was a blur of city lights and troubled thoughts. Her father's massive Victorian house loomed ahead, its windows warmly lit against the darkening sky. Emma parked her car in the circular driveway, taking a moment to compose herself before heading inside. Martha, their housekeeper, greeted her at the door. "Your father's waiting in the dining room, Miss Emma. He asked that you join him for dinner." Emma's stomach churned. "Thank you, Martha." The dining room was too large for just two people, but her father insisted on maintaining certain standards. He sat at the head of the long mahogany table, reading something on his tablet. Without looking up, he gestured to the chair on his right. "You're late," he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. "I had some work to finish." Emma settled into her chair as Martha served the first course, a delicate butternut squash soup. "Work?" Her father set down his tablet. "Or were you spending more time with the janitor?" Emma's spoon clinked against the bowl. "His name is Sam. I don't care what his name is." Richard Worthington's steel-gray eyes fixed on his daughter. "What I care about is protecting this family's reputation. Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "I heard exactly what they're saying," Emma replied, her voice tight. "And I'm disappointed that it matters more to you than doing what's right." "What's right?" He barked out a laugh. "What's right is maintaining the standards that keep this company successful. What's right is understanding your position and the responsibilities that come with it." "Mom would have understood," Emma said quietly. Her father's face softened slightly at the mention of his late wife. "Your mother had a kind heart, yes. But she also understood the importance of appearances in our world." "She taught me that true greatness wears humility," Emma countered. "That's exactly what I see in Sam, a humble man with more dignity than all those people laughing behind his back." "Emma." Her father's tone held a warning. "I've been patient. I've allowed this, whatever it is, to play out. But it needs to stop. The board members are talking. Our clients are asking questions. Do you want to throw away everything we've built because you feel sorry for the janitor?" "I don't feel sorry for him." Emma pushed her soup away, untouched. "I respect him. He's lost everything, his wife, his daughter, and still shows up every day with grace and kindness. When was the last time you even looked at him? Really looked at him? That's enough." Richard Worthington's palm hit the table, making the silverware rattle. "I've warned you once. Now I'm telling you, end this inappropriate friendship, or there will be consequences." Emma stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Then there will be consequences." She left the dining room, ignoring her father's calls to come back. Up in her bedroom, she closed the door and sank onto her king-sized bed, the same bed she'd had since she was a teenager. The same bed where her mother used to sit and brush her hair, telling her stories about standing up for what you believe in. The city lights twinkled beyond her window as Emma changed into her silk pajamas and slipped under the covers. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, her mind kept returning to that moment in the banquet hall, the cruel laughter, Sam's downturned face, and the sudden, crystal-clear certainty that she had to act. She remembered the softness of his weathered cheek against her lips, the absolute silence that followed, and the way his eyes had met hers afterward, filled with surprise and something like hope. It hadn't been calculated or planned. It had been pure instinct, the kind of instinct her mother would have called listening to your heart. Rolling onto her side, Emma watched the shadows play across her ceiling. The whispers would continue. The stares would get worse. Her father might even follow through on his threats. But in that moment, lying in the dark, Emma made her choice. She wouldn't abandon Sam. She wouldn't bow to their prejudice or cruel judgments. Whatever the cost, her reputation, her position, even her relationship with her father, some things were worth fighting for. The simple dignity of a good man, the right to show kindness without fear, the courage to stand up against injustice, even when it wore a designer suit and sat in a corner office. Emma closed her eyes, feeling a strange peace settle over her, despite the turmoil ahead. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in the darkness. True greatness wears humility. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight she knew exactly where she stood. The morning light streamed through the windows of Worthington Corporate Towers as Emma walked purposefully through the lobby. She found Sam methodically mopping near the west entrance, his movements careful and precise. His weathered face brightened slightly when he saw her approaching. "Good morning, Sam," Emma said warmly. She noticed how he straightened up, though his eyes remained downcast. "I have something to ask you." Sam paused his work, leaning on his mop handle. "Miss Worthington," "Emma," she corrected gently. "Please." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Emma, what can I do for you?" "Actually, it's what we can do together." She pulled out her phone and showed him a flyer. "The Riverside Community Center is hosting their monthly meal service today. My family sponsors it, but I'd love for you to come help out, as my friend." Sam's eyes widened slightly, and he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I don't know if that would be appropriate, Miss Emma." "Why not?" She touched his arm lightly. "You're kind, hardworking, and great with people. We need volunteers who care." He glanced around the lobby, where early morning workers hurried past with their coffee cups and briefcases. "Your father isn't involved in this particular project," Emma finished. "This is my initiative. Please, Sam? The families there could use a friendly face." After a long moment, Sam nodded. "What time?" "I'll pick you up at noon," Emma said, beaming. "Just wear something comfortable." When Emma pulled up to the employee entrance at precisely noon, she found Sam waiting. He wore clean jeans and a pressed blue button-down shirt that made him look younger somehow. The usual stoop in his shoulders was less pronounced. The community center was a brick building with colorful murals decorating its walls. Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed, with long tables and chairs. The smell of home-cooked food filled the air as volunteers bustled about, setting up serving stations. "Everyone," Emma called out to the other volunteers. "This is my friend Sam. He's joining us today." Sam ducked his head at the introduction, but Emma noticed how he straightened up when she said the word friend. The other volunteers welcomed him warmly, and soon he was helping to arrange tables and set out plates. As families began arriving, Emma watched Sam from across the room. He spoke softly to the children, crouching down to their level to hear their whispered requests for extra rolls or second helpings of mac and cheese. His gentle manner drew shy smiles from weary parents. "More meatballs, please?" A little girl with braids looked up at Sam hopefully. "Well now," Sam said, pretending to study the serving tray seriously, "I think we might just have some extra special ones right here." He carefully selected 3 meatballs and placed them on her plate, making her giggle. Emma worked alongside him, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. She noticed how he anticipated needs before they arose, refilling water pitchers, clearing plates, finding high chairs for young mothers struggling with babies. As the afternoon wound down and the last families left with takeout containers, Emma and Sam joined the cleanup crew. They worked side by side, wiping tables and stacking chairs. "Thank you for coming today," Emma said as they gathered their things to leave. "You were wonderful with everyone." "It felt good," Sam admitted quietly. "Reminded me of when Sarah was little. She loved helping people too." Emma knew he was referring to his late daughter. "Would you like to walk back? It's only a few blocks and it's such a nice day." Sam nodded, and they set off together. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, until Emma noticed Sam's lips moving slightly, as if he was reciting something to himself. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. Sam's cheeks colored slightly. "Oh, it's nothing. Just something I wrote a long time ago, when I first started working nights." Emma stopped walking. "You write?" "Poetry sometimes," he admitted, looking embarrassed. "Nothing special. Just helps me make sense of things." "Would you share it? The one you were just thinking of?" Sam hesitated, then took a deep breath. His voice was soft but steady as he recited, "Night shift warriors with calloused hands, moving through shadows across empty lands. While others dream in beds of ease, we sweep and shine with quiet keys. Our labor hidden from daylight's eyes, but morning's sparkle tells no lies. In every polish, every shine, we leave small pieces of our lives behind." Emma stood still, moved by the simple beauty of his words. "Sam, that's beautiful. You have to share these with people someday." Sam's face flushed deep red. "Oh no, I couldn't. They're just simple thoughts, nothing special." "They're far from simple," Emma insisted. "They give voice to people who are too often invisible. You have a gift." Sam ducked his head, but Emma caught the small smile playing at his lips. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly proud of something about himself. "Maybe someday," he murmured, and they resumed their walk, the autumn sun warming their shoulders as they made their way back to the towers where their unlikely friendship had begun. Monday morning brought a heavy atmosphere to Worthington corporate towers. The weekend hadn't dulled the whispers. If anything, they'd grown louder. Sam pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway of the executive floor, his shoulders slightly hunched as he tried to make himself invisible. "Did you see them at the community center?" A woman's voice drifted from the break room. "The CEO's daughter serving soup with the janitor? It's embarrassing." Sam's hands tightened on the handle of his cart, but he kept moving. The gleaming floors reflected his worn work boots as he walked. "She's just acting out," another voice replied. "Daddy issues, if you ask me." A burst of laughter made Sam wince. He paused outside Conference Room B, reaching for his glass cleaner and cloth. Through the glass walls he could see 3 executives inside, their heads bent together in conversation. "Mark my words," said James Peterson, the head of marketing, loud enough for his voice to carry. "That janitor's playing her like a fiddle, probably thinks he can climb the corporate ladder on her coattails." Sam's hand trembled as he sprayed the glass. The familiar lemon scent that usually brought him comfort now made his stomach turn. "Poor Emma," a female executive said, adjusting her designer blazer. "She doesn't realize she's being used. I mean, what else could he want?" Sam moved the cloth in slow circles, though the glass was already spotless. Each word felt like a physical blow. Down the hall, the elevator dinged. Emma stepped out, her heels clicking against the floor. Several employees quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in their phones or tablets. One woman whispered something behind her hand to her colleague, both of them stealing glances at Emma. Sam ducked his head and quickly pushed his cart toward the supply closet. He couldn't bear to see the judgment on people's faces when they looked at Emma judgment she was facing because of him. Inside the small closet, Sam leaned against the metal shelving unit. The sharp smell of cleaning supplies surrounded him as he pulled out the worn notebook he kept in his back pocket. The pages were soft from years of handling, filled with poems he'd written during lunch breaks and quiet moments. His eyes fell on the poem he'd shared with Emma yesterday. The words that had felt meaningful when he'd recited them to her now seemed simple, amateur. "In corners swept and windows shined, in floors that gleam beneath their feet, we leave our silent mark behind as life flows on upon the street." The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as Sam stared at the words. Who was he kidding? He was just a janitor with a 6th-grade education trying to write poetry. The executives were right. What could he possibly offer someone like Emma? He thought of her kind smile, her genuine interest in his words. But now that smile seemed naive. She was young, rebellious maybe, trying to prove something to her father. And he was just convenient. The door to the supply closet creaked open slightly, and Sam quickly shoved the notebook back in his pocket. Robert Chen from accounting peered in, then quickly looked away when he saw Sam. "Oh, sorry," Robert muttered. "Didn't know you were hiding in here." The door closed with a click that echoed in the small space. Sam pulled the notebook out again, his fingers trembling slightly as he tore out the page with the poem. "They're right," he whispered, crumpling the paper into a tight ball. "What was I thinking?" He tossed the wadded paper into the trash bin, where it landed among empty cleaning solution bottles and used paper towels. His poetry belonged there, hidden away with the other discarded things. Sam's shoulders sagged as he reached for his mop. He had floors to clean, bathrooms to maintain, windows to wash. That was his place, his role. He'd been foolish to think he could be anything more. The crumpled poem lay in the trash, the words about dignity and unseen labor now buried beneath the very supplies he used to stay invisible. Outside, the whispers continued, a constant reminder of the gulf between his world and Emma's. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the riverbank where Sam Carter sat, his weathered hands clasped together as he watched the water flow. His janitor's uniform was still on, though his shift had ended an hour ago. The gentle current reminded him of easier days, when he used to bring his daughter here to feed the ducks and make up stories about where the water might lead. Emma Worthington spotted him from the walking path, her heels clicking softly against the concrete as she approached. She'd changed out of her office attire into a simple sweater and jeans, looking more like any other young woman than the CEO's daughter. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly, settling onto the bench beside him. "You mentioned this spot the other day." Sam nodded but didn't look up, his eyes fixed on a leaf spinning in an eddy near the shore. "Miss Worthington, maybe your father was right. All this attention, it's not good for anyone." "Emma," she corrected gently. "And my father isn't always right." She pulled something from her bag, a crumpled piece of paper that Sam recognized immediately. His eyes widened. "Where did you? The cleaning staff found it in your closet." She smoothed out the poem he'd thrown away. "Sam, this is beautiful. These words about finding dignity in honest work, about seeing the extraordinary in ordinary moments. People need to hear this." Sam shook his head, a sad smile crossing his face. "Nobody wants to hear poetry from a janitor, Emma. I know my place." "Your place?" Emma's voice carried a hint of steel beneath its warmth. "The same place where you comfort Mary from accounting when she's having a rough day? Or where you help old Mr. Peterson with his walker every morning? The place where you make everyone feel seen and valued?" Sam shifted uncomfortably on the bench. A family of ducks paddled past, the little ones following their mother in a perfect line. "I've been watching," Emma continued. "Not just since. Well, since that night at the banquet, but for weeks before. You have a gift, Sam, not just with words, but with people, especially with children." The mention of children made Sam's breath catch. He remembered the community center, how naturally he'd connected with the kids there, how their eyes had lit up when he'd told them stories while serving meals. "Those children at the center," Emma said, as if reading his thoughts, "they need someone like you. Someone who can show them that their worth isn't measured by their circumstances. Someone who can teach them to find beauty in unexpected places." Sam finally turned to look at her. They deserve better than lessons from a janitor. They deserve someone who sees them, really sees them. Emma touched his arm lightly. "Like you saw little Tommy yesterday, when he was hiding behind his mother. You knew exactly what to say to make him smile." The memory brought an involuntary smile to Sam's face. The shy boy had reminded him so much of himself at that age. "The center needs after-school tutors," Emma said carefully. "People who can help with homework, yes, but more importantly, people who can inspire, share stories, maybe even poetry." Sam's fingers brushed against the notebook in his pocket, the one he always carried but rarely showed anyone. "I don't know. Just twice a week," Emma pressed gently. "After your shift, I've already spoken to Mrs. Martinez, who runs the program. She'd love to have you." A group of office workers passed by on their evening commute, their chatter carrying across the water. Sam watched them go, thinking about how many times he'd felt invisible to such people. But then he remembered Tommy's face lighting up yesterday, and the way the other children had gathered around as he'd told them about the river and its stories. "They might not want me there," Sam said quietly, but Emma could hear the shift in his voice. "They already do," she replied. "Mrs. Martinez said several of the kids asked about you after yesterday." The sun was setting now, casting orange light across the water. Sam pulled out his notebook, its pages worn from years of use. He ran his thumb along the edge, feeling the familiar texture. "Maybe," he began, then straightened his shoulders slightly. "Maybe I could try. Just twice a week, like you said." Emma's smile was warm and genuine. That's all anyone can ask. To try. Sam stood up, tucking his notebook under his arm. For the first time that day, he felt something like hope stirring in his chest. "I should head home. Got to look over some old poems if I'm going to do this right." "You already know how to do it right, Sam," Emma said, standing too. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." They walked together to the path where they would part ways, Emma to her car, Sam to his modest apartment 3 blocks away. The weight of his poetry notebook under his arm felt different now, not like a secret to hide, but like a gift to share. The grand ballroom of the Worthington Plaza Hotel sparkled under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in elegant evening gowns mingled, their quiet conversations blending with the gentle notes of a string quartet playing in the corner. Journalists from local newspapers positioned themselves strategically around the room, cameras ready to capture the city's elite at the company's annual charity gala. Sam Carter stood in a small alcove near the service entrance, tugging nervously at the collar of his borrowed tuxedo. The fabric felt foreign against his skin, so different from his familiar janitor's uniform. His hands, though scrubbed clean, still bore the calluses of years of honest labor. In his pocket, a carefully folded piece of paper contained the speech he'd written and rewritten dozens of times. "You look very handsome," Emma's voice came from behind him. She wore a midnight blue gown that made her look like she belonged among the stars. "Are you ready?" Sam's throat felt dry. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea, Miss Worthington. These people, they're not here to listen to a janitor." Emma touched his arm gently. "They're here to listen to a man of wisdom and courage. And please, how many times do I have to tell you to call me Emma?" The memory of the past few weeks flooded back to him. Emma had fought hard to convince the board to let him speak. "It will show our commitment to dignity and equality," she had argued in meetings. "It will demonstrate that Worthington Corp values all its employees." Some had resisted, but Emma's persistence had won out. The string quartet finished their piece, and a polite round of applause rippled through the crowd. Sam watched as Emma's father, CEO Richard Worthington, approached the podium. His commanding presence immediately drew all eyes to him. Distinguished guests, fellow board members, members of the press. Richard's voice carried clearly through the ballroom. "Tonight, we gather not just to raise funds for our charitable initiatives, but to celebrate the spirit of human dignity." He paused, his eyes finding Emma in the crowd. "My daughter recently reminded me that true leadership means recognizing the value in every individual, so tonight I'd like to introduce someone special. Please welcome Samuel Carter." Sam's legs felt like lead as he made his way to the podium. The lights seemed brighter, the room larger, the crowd more intimidating. But then he caught Emma's encouraging smile from the front row, and something settled within him. He carefully unfolded his paper, smoothing it against the podium. The microphone picked up the sound of his deep breath. "Good evening," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "Most of you know me as the janitor who keeps your offices clean. Some of you have never noticed me at all. That's okay. Being invisible sometimes comes with the job." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. Sam continued, gaining confidence. "But being invisible doesn't mean being without value. Every morning when I polish the marble floors in the lobby, I think about the hundreds of people who will walk across them. When I clean the windows, I think about the sunlight that will stream through to brighten someone's day. When I empty the trash bins, I think about making space for new ideas." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces now fixed intently on him. "My late wife used to say that dignity isn't about what you do, but how you do it. She taught that to our daughter, who we lost too soon. Both of them showed me that every task, no matter how small, can be done with pride and purpose." In the audience, several people dabbed at their eyes. Even some of the journalists had lowered their cameras, caught up in his words. "Recently, someone remarkable taught me that true greatness wears humility." His eyes found Emma's. "She showed me that kindness isn't weakness, and that standing up for others takes more courage than staying silent. She helped me remember that every person in this room, from the CEO to the newest intern to, yes, even the janitor, deserves to be seen, heard, and valued." Sam's voice grew stronger, filled with quiet conviction. "We all have invisible heroes in our lives. The security guard who keeps us safe, the maintenance worker who fixes our heat, the cleaning staff who make our workspace pleasant. They might not wear suits or have corner offices, but their work matters. Their dignity matters." Tears were flowing freely now among the audience. Even Richard Worthington was blinking rapidly, his usual stern expression softened. "So tonight, as we raise money for worthy causes, I ask you to remember this. Sometimes the greatest acts of charity aren't about money at all. Sometimes they're about taking the time to see the humanity in each person we meet, about offering respect, regardless of title or position, about recognizing that every job has value when it's done with pride and purpose." Sam folded his paper, though he hadn't needed it. "Thank you for seeing me tonight. Thank you for listening. And thank you for understanding that dignity isn't measured by the clothes we wear or the title we hold, but by the way we treat each other." The silence that followed lasted only a moment before the room erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, their faces shining with emotion. The journalists' cameras flashed rapidly, capturing the standing ovation. In the front row, Emma stood clapping, tears streaming down her face, her smile radiant with pride. For the first time since he'd started working at Worthington Corp., Sam felt the weight of invisibility lift from his shoulders. He wasn't just the janitor anymore. He wasn't someone to be overlooked or dismissed. Looking out at the crowd of people applauding him, Sam finally felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He belonged. The early morning sun filtered through the windows of Sam's modest apartment as he prepared for work. He hummed softly while ironing his uniform, taking extra care with the creases. Last night's charity gala still felt like a dream. The applause, the respectful nods, Emma's proud smile. For the first time in years, he felt truly valued. His peaceful morning routine was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Opening it, he found Mrs. Peterson from next door, clutching a newspaper with worried eyes. "Sam, dear, have you seen this?" She thrust the paper into his hands. There, splashed across the front page of the city's most prominent newspaper, was a photo of Emma kissing his cheek at the banquet weeks ago. The headline screamed, "CEO's daughter in secret romance with company janitor." Sam's hands trembled as he read further. The article quoted an anonymous senior executive, claiming that Emma and Sam had been carrying on a clandestine relationship, suggesting impropriety and scandal. His stomach churned at the calculated cruelty of the words. His phone buzzed with text messages from the few coworkers who had his number. News alerts kept popping up on his screen, more online blogs and news sites picking up the story, each version more sensational than the last. When Sam arrived at work, the lobby fell silent. Employees who had warmly congratulated him just yesterday now averted their eyes. A group of executives huddled near the elevator, whispering and casting suspicious glances his way. "There he is, the gold digger himself," a voice sneered. Sam recognized Gregory Phillips, a senior executive known for his ruthless ambition, speaking loudly to his colleagues. "I always knew he was manipulating her, using her kindness for his own gain." Sam gripped his mop handle tighter, keeping his head down as he worked. The morning dragged on endlessly, each minute filled with whispers and judgmental stares. His phone continued buzzing, reporters trying to reach him for comment. Around mid-morning, Emma burst through the main doors, her face flushed with anger. She marched straight to Phillips's office, throwing open his door without knocking. "It was you, wasn't it?" Her voice carried across the open office space. "You leaked that story to the press." Phillips's smug smile confirmed her accusation. "The shareholders deserve to know the truth about your inappropriate relationship with the help." "There is no relationship." Emma's voice shook with fury. "You twisted a simple act of kindness into something tawdry because you couldn't stand seeing Sam gain respect." Their confrontation drew a crowd. Sam wanted to disappear into the shadows but found himself rooted to the spot, watching the scene unfold. "Oh, please," Phillips scoffed. "Why else would someone like you spend time with a janitor? The photos, the community events, the poetry readings, it's obvious what's going on." "What's obvious is your prejudice," Emma shot back. "You can't comprehend kindness without ulterior motives because you've never shown any yourself." Security guards appeared, summoned by Phillips's assistant. "Miss Worthington, your father requests your immediate presence in his office." Emma straightened her spine, shooting Phillips one last contemptuous look before striding toward the executive elevator. Sam caught her eye briefly. She tried to smile reassuringly, but he could see the worry beneath her brave facade. Minutes later, Sam received his own summons to the CEO's office. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like a journey to the gallows. He thought of all the people who would be hurt by this scandal. Emma, her father, the company's reputation. His presence had brought chaos to their ordered world. The CEO's secretary ushered him into the massive corner office without meeting his eyes. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed. Her father, Richard Worthington, paced behind his desk like a caged lion. "Sit down," Worthington barked at Sam. The CEO's face was red with barely contained rage. Sam lowered himself into a chair, his work-worn hands folded in his lap. The morning newspaper lay on the desk between them, that damaging photo seeming to mock them all. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Worthington's voice was deadly quiet. "The shareholders are in an uproar. Our stock dropped 10 points this morning. My daughter's reputation is being dragged through the mud in every tabloid in the city." "Dad, this isn't Sam's fault," Emma protested. "Phillips orchestrated this whole thing." "Enough!" Worthington slammed his hand on the desk. "You've done enough damage with your misguided charity case. Did you think about the consequences? About how this would affect our family name?" Sam sat silently, each word striking him like a physical blow. He thought of his late wife, how she'd always taught their daughter to hold her head high, no matter what others said. But now, shame bent his shoulders beneath the weight of Worthington's accusations. "This ends now," Worthington declared, pulling out a document. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clean out your locker." "No," Emma stepped forward. "You can't do this. Sam hasn't done anything wrong." "I can, and I will." Worthington's tone left no room for argument. "This company's reputation is worth more than your bleeding heart, Emma, and you," he turned to Sam, "you should have known better than to let this go so far." Sam stared at his calloused hands, feeling the weight of decades of prejudice and assumptions crushing down on him. Everything he'd gained in the past weeks, respect, dignity, friendship, crumbled to dust in the face of society's rigid expectations. Emma started to speak again, but Sam finally lifted his head. The deep sadness in his eyes silenced her protests. They both knew this moment had been inevitable from the start. The world wasn't ready to accept their friendship, to believe in simple kindness without suspicious motives. In that moment, Sam felt every one of his years, every mile he'd walked with his mop, every silent slight he'd endured. But what hurt most was knowing that his presence had brought pain to the one person who had seen him as more than just a janitor. Sam's hands trembled as he placed his well-worn uniform into the cardboard box. The small apartment felt even smaller tonight, shadows creeping across walls that had witnessed his quiet life for the past decade. A single lamp cast a warm glow over his modest possessions. A few books, some framed photos, and his cherished poetry notebook resting on top of the box. The evening news hummed softly in the background, but Sam barely heard it. His mind kept replaying the morning's events, the whispers in the hallway, the newspaper headlines, and worst of all, the look of anguish on Emma's face when her father demanded his resignation. He picked up a photo frame from his nightstand, a faded image of his late wife and daughter at the park. "I tried my best," he whispered to their smiling faces. "I really did." His thumb traced the edge of the frame before carefully wrapping it in an old t-shirt and placing it in the box. The poetry notebook caught his eye again. Its worn blue cover held years of his thoughts, dreams, and observations. Last night, those same words had moved an entire ballroom to tears. Now, they felt like evidence of his presumption. Who was he to think his words mattered? He left it untouched atop the stack. Sam knelt beside his bed, clasping his weathered hands together. "Lord," he prayed softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't ask anything for myself tonight. But please, please watch over Emma. She risked everything to show kindness to someone like me. Don't let her suffer for it." His voice cracked on the last words. Rising slowly, he walked to his small kitchen window. The city lights twinkled beyond, reminding him of the charity gala's chandeliers. How quickly things could change, from standing ovations to forced resignations in less than 24 hours. He began emptying his kitchen drawers. The familiar routine of packing helped quiet his mind, though each item held a memory. The coffee mug Emma had brought him that morning in the courtyard, the notebook where he'd jotted down the children's names from his tutoring sessions, the newspaper clipping of the community center event they'd attended together. In her bedroom across town, Emma sat cross-legged on her king-sized bed, her phone clutched in her hands. The room's elegant decor felt suffocating tonight. Designer curtains couldn't shut out the harsh reality of what had happened. She opened her messaging app for the 100th time that evening. Sam's name sat at the top of her recent contacts, their last exchange a simple "thank you for everything" from him after the gala. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, composing and deleting message after message. "Sam, I'm so sorry. Delete. We can fight this. Delete. Please don't leave. Delete." Tears blurred her vision as she stared at the blank message field. What could she possibly say? How could words fix what malice and prejudice had broken? The tears finally spilled over, rolling down her cheeks in silent streams. Her phone screen dimmed, then went dark, reflecting her own tear-stained face back at her. The silence in her room felt heavy, broken only by distant traffic sounds and the occasional ping of her phone, more news alerts about the scandal, no doubt. Both Sam and Emma remained in their respective spaces, separated by miles of city streets but united in their pain. Neither spoke, neither slept, both trapped in the suffocating quiet of a night that marked the end of something beautiful and pure, a friendship that had dared to challenge the world's cruel assumptions. Sam's box sat half-packed, his poetry notebook still perched on top, like a final testament to dreams that had briefly seemed possible. Emma's phone remained dark in her lap, unsent messages floating in the space between them like unspoken prayers. The night grew deeper, and still they sat in silence, worlds apart. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the heavy clouds when Sam Carter pushed through the revolving door of Worthington Corporate Towers one last time. His cardboard box, containing 12 years of memories, felt heavier than it should. His poetry notebook sat on top, its worn edges peeking out beneath a small frame, holding a photo of his late wife and daughter. The lobby, usually bustling at this hour, grew unnaturally quiet as he walked across the polished marble floor, the same floor he'd spent countless hours maintaining. The click of his worn shoes echoed in the silence. A few early morning employees stopped their conversations mid-sentence, watching him pass. Janet from accounting lowered her eyes, clutching her coffee cup closer. Two junior executives who had laughed at him just days ago now stood awkwardly by the elevator, their smug smiles replaced with uncomfortable glances. The security guard, Mike, who had shared countless early morning conversations with Sam, couldn't meet his gaze. "Sam?" Mike called out softly, his voice thick with regret. "I'm sorry, buddy." Sam managed a small nod but kept walking. The weight of dozens of eyes followed him, some guilty, some satisfied, others simply curious about the janitor who had dared to reach beyond his station. The same marble floors that had witnessed his humiliation now witnessed his departure. Through the glass doors, he could see his replacement already at work, a younger man in a crisp new uniform, sweeping with vigor. The sight made Sam's throat tighten. He'd trained himself to be invisible for so long, but now, in this moment of departure, he felt exposed under the collective gaze of the corporate world he'd served faithfully. Behind him, hurried footsteps echoed across the lobby. "Sam, wait!" He recognized Emma's voice immediately, but he couldn't bring himself to turn around. The click of her heels grew louder, more urgent. Sam quickened his pace, pushing through the outer doors into the cool morning air. The box in his arms provided a shield, a barrier between him and the world he was leaving behind. "Please, Sam," Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "You don't have to leave like this." But he did. He knew he did. Every step away from the building felt like pulling against an invisible thread, but he forced himself forward. The gray sky above threatened rain, matching his mood perfectly. At the corner, he paused briefly, allowing himself one last look at the tower that had been his workplace for over a decade. The gleaming glass and steel structure stretched toward the clouds, imposing and indifferent. From the ground floor, he could see Emma through the glass doors, her elegant figure now still, one hand pressed against the transparent barrier between them. The first drops of rain began to fall as Sam turned onto Cedar Street. The weather seemed to mirror his inner turmoil, each raindrop a tear he couldn't allow himself to shed. His box was getting damp, but he didn't hurry his pace. There was nowhere he needed to be anymore. Other morning commuters rushed past him, umbrellas unfurling like black flowers in the increasing rain. Sam felt the water seeping into his jacket, but he welcomed the cold. It helped numb the ache in his chest, the hollow feeling that had taken root since yesterday's confrontation in the CEO's office. The rain grew steadier as he walked, plastering his gray hair to his forehead. The cardboard box was starting to soften, forcing him to hold it more carefully. Water dripped from his nose, ran down his neck, soaked through his clothes. Still, he maintained his deliberate pace, each step taking him further from the life he'd known. His poetry notebook was getting wet. The thought finally prompted him to seek shelter under a shop awning. As he adjusted his grip on the box, a few drops fell onto the photograph of his family. He wiped them away gently with his thumb, remembering how his late wife would have handled this situation with grace and dignity. The rain intensified, drumming against the awning above him. Through the curtain of water, the world looked distorted, dreamlike. Business people scurried past, their figures blurred by the downpour. Sam stood still, watching them rush to their offices, to their important meetings, to their secure positions in life. When the rain showed no signs of letting up, Sam stepped back into it. His shoes squeaked with every step now, and water ran down his face in steady streams. The box was definitely compromised, threatening to spill its contents onto the wet sidewalk. 3 blocks from the tower, he passed the little coffee shop where Emma had first truly talked with him, where she'd listened to his story without judgment. The memory of that morning, of being truly seen and heard, made his chest tighten. But he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, while the gray sky wept above him. The city streets grew less crowded as he moved away from the business district. The impressive buildings gave way to older, shorter structures. The rain continued its relentless fall, turning the world into a monochrome painting of grays and silvers. Sam's shoulders slumped under the weight of both his box and his despair, but he pressed on. Each step took him further from the tower, from Emma's kindness, from the brief moment when he dared to believe he could be more than just a janitor. The rain masked the few tears that finally escaped, running down his cheeks to mingle with the raindrops. By the time he reached his neighborhood, his shoes were squelching, and the cardboard box was barely holding together. The streets here were nearly empty, the rain having driven everyone indoors. Sam's steps slowed as his building came into view, a modest apartment complex that seemed even more dreary in the rain. The gray sky above showed no signs of clearing, matching the heaviness in his heart. Each raindrop felt like a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd never really had to begin with. Sam stood there in the downpour, letting the rain wash over him, before finally moving toward his building's entrance. His world had shrunk back to what it was before Emma's kindness, before the poetry readings, before he dared to dream of something more. The rain continued to fall, a steady rhythm that seemed to whisper, "This is where you belong. This is all you'll ever be." The crystal chandelier cast long shadows across the Worthington family's massive dining room table. Emma sat across from her father, pushing her untouched salmon around the bone china plate. The gentle clink of sterling silver against porcelain was the only sound breaking the tense silence. "I won't apologize for defending Sam," Emma finally said, setting down her fork. Her voice was quiet but firm. Her father, Richard Worthington, dabbed his mouth with a crisp linen napkin. "Emma, you need to understand the position you've put this company in. The board members are furious." "The board members?" Emma's cheeks flushed. "Or just you, Dad? Watch your tone, young lady." Richard's knuckles whitened around his water glass. "I've given you everything. The best schools, the finest opportunities. And Mom taught me to use those privileges to help others." Emma pushed her chair back, the legs scraping against hardwood. She would have stood up for Sam. Her father's face darkened at the mention of his late wife. "Don't bring your mother into this." "Why not? She's the reason I am who I am." Emma stood, her hands trembling slightly. "She taught me that real leadership means defending those who can't defend themselves." "This isn't about leadership." Richard slammed his palm on the table, making the silverware jump. "This is about propriety, about maintaining standards. That janitor, his name is Sam." Emma's voice rose. "Samuel Carter. He's a human being with dignity and worth. He writes beautiful poetry. He tutors children. He's endured more loss than anyone should have to bear, and he still shows up every day with kindness and grace." "Poetry?" Richard scoffed. "Is that what this is about? Some wannabe poet playing on your sympathies?" Emma's eyes flashed. "You've never even spoken to him, have you? Never looked him in the eye or asked about his life. You just see a uniform, a position, Something beneath you. I see reality, Richard growled. I see decades of building this company's reputation threatened by your schoolgirl crusade. Crusade? Emma laughed bitterly. Is that what you call basic human decency? The grandfather clock in the corner ticked heavily as father and daughter stared each other down. Outside, rain began to patter against the floor-to-ceiling windows. You're just like her, Richard finally said, his voice softer but still hard. Your mother always thought she could change the world with kindness. Maybe she was right. Emma's chin lifted. Maybe that's exactly what the world needs. The world isn't that simple, Emma. Business isn't that simple. Then maybe business needs to change. She walked to the window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. We have over 2,000 employees, Dad. How many of them feel invisible? How many of them drag themselves to work every day, feeling worthless, beneath notice? That's not my concern. My job is to keep this company profitable. Emma turned back to face him. Mom used to say that profit without purpose is poverty. Richard pushed his chair back roughly. Enough about your mother. She's gone, Emma. And her idealistic notions made me who I am, Emma cut in. And I won't apologize for that either. She walked to the dining room door, then paused. You know what's really destroying this company's reputation? Not my friendship with Sam. It's the cruelty. The whispers. The way we treat people like they're disposable. Where are you going? Richard demanded, as she reached for the door handle. To fix what you broke. Emma's voice was steel, wrapped in silk. To show our employees and shareholders what real leadership looks like. Emma, I'm calling a town hall meeting, she announced. Everyone will be there. Board members, shareholders, employees, all levels, all positions. You can't. I can. And I will. She met his gaze steadily. You taught me to take initiative, remember? To see a problem and solve it? Richard's face reddened. This is different. This is exactly what this company needs. Emma straightened her shoulders. And if you try to stop me, I'll go to the press. I'll tell them everything. How we treat our workers, how we value image over humanity, how we fired a man for daring to have dignity. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard Worthington stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Emma's hand tightened on the doorknob. I love you, Dad. But Mom was right. True greatness wears humility. And right now, we're showing anything but greatness. She left the dining room, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. In her wake, Richard Worthington sank back into his chair, looking suddenly old and uncertain. In her home office, Emma pulled out her laptop and began typing. The town hall would need careful planning. Every detail would have to be perfect. As rain drummed against the windows, she worked late into the night, crafting an email that would go out to every employee, board member, and shareholder. It was time to remind everyone what real values looked like. Time to show them that true worth couldn't be measured in titles or tailored suits. Time to bring Sam Carter back home. Emma sat at her desk early the next morning, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. The office around her was still quiet, with only the faint hum of the air conditioning and occasional ding of the elevator breaking the silence. She had arrived before sunrise, determined to set her plan in motion. To all Worthington corporate employees and shareholders, she read aloud softly, fine-tuning the invitation. You are cordially invited to an important town hall meeting this Friday at 2 p.m. in the Grand Conference Center. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky in soft pinks and oranges outside her window. Emma took a sip of her cooling coffee and continued typing. This meeting will address recent events and celebrate the true spirit of our company's values. Attendance is strongly encouraged. Her office phone buzzed. It was Martha, her father's secretary. Miss Worthington, your father would like to see you immediately. Tell him I'm in meetings all morning, Emma replied firmly. She couldn't let him stop this now. After sending the company-wide email, Emma pulled out her personal phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed Sam's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Sam, it's Emma, she said softly. I know you're hurting, and I'm so sorry, but please don't give up. I'm organizing a town hall meeting this Friday. The whole company will be there. This is your chance to show them who you really are. Not just the janitor they chose to ignore, but the poet, the mentor, the man of dignity I've come to know. Please call me back." She spent the next hour drafting her speech, crumpling paper after paper as the words never seemed quite right. The office gradually filled with the usual morning bustle, but Emma barely noticed. Her mind kept returning to Sam's devastated expression as he'd walked out yesterday, carrying that small box of belongings. Around 10, she tried calling again. Still no answer. Emma grabbed her car keys and headed for the elevator. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," she called to her assistant. "This can't wait." 20 minutes later, she pulled up outside Sam's modest apartment building. The concrete steps were cracked and paint peeled from the railings, but the small flower boxes in the windows showed someone cared. Emma's heels clicked on the worn steps as she climbed to the 3rd floor. She knocked firmly on apartment 3C. No response. "Sam?" she called through the door. "It's Emma. Please open up." Silence stretched for a long moment before she heard slow footsteps approach. The door opened just enough to reveal Sam's tired face. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Can I come in? Please?" Sam hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. Emma entered a small but tidy living room. Books lined the shelves, and a worn armchair sat by the window. His poetry notebook lay closed on a side table. "I'm organizing a town hall," Emma said, turning to face him. "The whole company will be there. This is our chance to change things." Sam shook his head. "Emma, you've done enough. More than enough. But we both know how this ends. People like me don't belong in your world." "That's not true," Emma insisted. "You've already changed so many lives. The children you tutor, the employees who've started treating the cleaning staff with respect. And look what it cost you," Sam interrupted. "Your reputation, your father's trust. Those are my choices to make." Emma stepped closer. "Remember what you told those kids at the community center? About dignity being something no one can take from you?" Sam turned away, staring out the window at the gray city skyline. "Sometimes it's better to accept things as they are. Is that what you really believe?" Emma picked up his poetry notebook. "Is that what the man who wrote these poems believes?" "Please," Sam said softly. "Just go." Emma set the notebook down gently. "The meeting is Friday at 2 p.m. I'll have security add you to the list." She walked to the door but paused with her hand on the knob. "You once told me that your late wife always said courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway." After Emma left, Sam sat heavily in his armchair. The afternoon light faded to evening as he remained there, lost in thought. Finally, as streetlights flickered on outside, he reached for his poetry notebook. The pages were worn from repeated handling. He turned to a poem he'd written years ago, just after losing his daughter. It spoke of finding light in darkness, of dignity in the face of loss, of faith when all seemed hopeless. Sam read the words slowly, feeling their truth echo in his heart. His hands trembled as he carefully tore out the page and folded it, tucking it into his shirt pocket. Then he stood and walked to his closet, where his best suit, old but well-maintained, hung waiting. "Maybe," he whispered to himself, touching the folded poem through his shirt. "Just maybe." The grand auditorium of Worthington Corporate Towers hummed with tension. Rows of plush seats filled quickly as employees, shareholders, and reporters filed in, their whispered conversations creating a soft buzz that echoed off the high ceiling. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. In the front row, CEO Richard Worthington sat with his arms crossed, his face set in stone. His crisp navy suit and steel-gray hair projected authority, but there was something uncertain in his eyes as he watched people take their seats. Board members flanked him on either side, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. Patricia from accounting nudged her colleague Tom. "I heard she's going to resign," she whispered, not quite quietly enough. Similar rumors rippled through the crowd like waves on a pond. The journalists sat together in a cluster, notebooks open and pens ready. Sarah Chen from the Daily Business Journal checked her recorder for the third time. This was the kind of story that could make a career, the CEO's daughter taking on corporate culture itself. At exactly 2 p.m., the house lights dimmed. The auditorium fell silent as Emma Worthington emerged from stage left. She wore a simple black dress that spoke of both authority and humility. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped a folder, but her steps were steady as she approached the podium. The microphone picked up her quiet breath as she settled behind it. Emma looked out at the sea of faces, some friendly, some hostile, most simply curious. Her father's stern expression caught her eye, but she didn't look away. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and smiled. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her racing heart. "Thank you all for coming today. I know there have been many rumors and questions about recent events at our company." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Emma continued, "But I'm not here to address gossip. I'm here to talk about something more important, the soul of this company." She paused, letting her words sink in. The silence in the room grew heavier. "When my mother was alive," Emma said, her voice softening with memory, "she taught me that true greatness wears humility, that the measure of a person isn't in their title or their salary, but in how they treat others." Her eyes found her father's, and for a moment something passed between them, a shared memory of the woman they'd both loved. "Over the past few weeks, I've witnessed both the worst and the best of what we can be. I've seen cruelty masked as humor, and I've seen quiet dignity in the face of mockery." Emma's voice grew stronger. "But most importantly, I've learned about courage from someone who never sought the spotlight." A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew who she meant. "We talk about corporate values," Emma continued, gesturing to the company's mission statement projected on the screen behind her. "Integrity, excellence, innovation. But what do these words mean if we don't extend them to every single person who walks through our doors?" She stepped away from the podium, moving to the edge of the stage. "There's someone here today who embodies these values more than anyone I've ever met. Someone who, despite facing daily disrespect, showed up every morning with a smile. Someone who wrote poetry between cleaning floors, who tutored children after hours without seeking recognition." The auditorium was absolutely still now. Even the journalists had stopped writing, caught up in Emma's words. "I'd like to invite that person to join me now." Emma turned toward stage right. "Sam Carter, would you please come out?" For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched thin as a wire. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the wings. Sam wore a clean but modest suit, clearly new and slightly ill-fitting. His work-worn hands clutched a worn notebook. Emma walked over and gently guided him to the podium. "Sam has something to share with us today," she said, stepping back. "Something that I think will help us all understand what we nearly lost." Sam stared at the notebook in his hands. The microphone picked up his shaky breath. He looked up at the crowd, then at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. His fingers carefully opened the notebook to a marked page. The paper trembled as he held it up. This is called Invisible Heroes," he said softly, his voice barely audible at first. Then he took a deep breath and began to read. "Before the suits arrive, before the marble shines, before the day begins its climb, we are here. In shadows we move. With quiet hands we prove that dignity has many grooves. We persevere." Forced. His voice grew stronger with each line, the words carrying a weight and grace that seemed to fill the entire room. The CEO's stern expression began to soften, almost imperceptibly, as Sam continued to read. Emma stood to the side, hands clasped, watching as the same quiet dignity that had first caught her attention now captured the attention of hundreds. She saw tears in the eyes of some employees who had once walked past Sam without a glance. She saw board members leaning forward in their seats. And she saw her father, for the first time in weeks, truly listening. Sam's weathered hands trembled as he held his worn poetry notebook. His voice, initially shaky, grew stronger with each line as he read, "In corners dim and hallways bright, we move like shadows through the light. With calloused hands and quiet grace, we keep your world a cleaner place. Beyond the suits and marble shine, We trace our worth in every line. Though eyes may pass right through our frame, each soul deserves to speak its name. For dignity dwells not in gold, but in the stories left untold. In simple tasks done day by day, in prayers we whisper as we pray. So next time when you pass me by, remember that beneath this tie, of cloth and cotton, worn and frayed, beats heart of gold that's unafraid. As the last words faded into silence, the auditorium remained perfectly still. Sam lowered the notebook, his chest tight with emotion. The quiet stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then, in the third row, a young secretary stood up. Her hands came together in a steady clap that echoed through the hall. 2 rows behind her, an accounting manager rose to his feet, joining the applause. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, people began standing throughout the auditorium. The sound swelled, growing from scattered applause into a thunderous ovation. Even those who had once whispered cruel jokes behind Sam's back were now on their feet, their faces showing a mix of shame and admiration. Emma stood at the podium, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She made no attempt to wipe them away, her smile radiant with pride and joy. The morning sunlight caught the tears on her face, making them sparkle like diamonds. In the front row, several board members exchanged meaningful glances. The CFO, who had once walked past Sam without a second glance, was now clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Reporters in the back scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing. The applause continued, showing no signs of dying down. Some employees were wiping their eyes, others nodding in Sam's direction with newfound respect. The same executive who had once mocked Sam now stood with his head slightly bowed, clapping slowly, deliberately. Sam stood rooted to his spot, overwhelmed by the response. His simple janitor's uniform seemed to shine differently now, no longer a mark of shame but a badge of honest labor. His eyes met those of various employees he'd cleaned up after for years, people who were finally seeing him as a person, not just a shadow in the background. The CEO, Richard Worthington, remained seated as the applause continued around him. His expression had transformed from its earlier stern mask into something softer, more contemplative. He looked at his daughter Emma, then back at Sam, as if seeing them both clearly for the first time. Finally, Richard rose from his seat. His movement sent a ripple of silence through the crowd as the applause gradually subsided. He straightened his expensive suit jacket and walked deliberately toward the stage. The click of his polished shoes against the floor echoed in the hushed auditorium. Every eye followed his progress as he climbed the steps to the stage. Emma watched her father approach, her chin lifted slightly, ready to defend Sam if necessary. Richard stopped in front of Sam, studying him with new eyes. The silence grew heavy with anticipation. Then, to everyone's surprise, he extended his hand. "Mr. Carter," Richard's voice carried clearly through the hall, "I owe you an apology." Sam hesitated for a moment before accepting the handshake. Richard's grip was firm, respectful, the handshake of equals. "Your words today have opened many eyes, including my own," Richard continued, addressing both Sam and the audience. "I've been reminded that true worth isn't measured by titles or positions, but by the impact we have on others." He turned to face the audience, keeping one hand on Sam's shoulder. "Effective immediately, I'm not only reinstating Mr. Carter's employment, I'm creating a new position. As Director of Employee Well-Being, Sam Carter will help foster the values of respect, dignity, and compassion that he has demonstrated throughout his time here." A fresh wave of applause erupted. Emma's hands flew to her mouth in surprise and joy. Sam stood stunned, his poetry notebook still clutched in one hand, as the reality of this transformation washed over him. Across the stage, Emma's eyes met Sam's. In that shared look passed volumes of understanding, the triumph of dignity over prejudice, of courage over fear, of humanity over status. Her small act of kindness weeks ago, a simple kiss on the cheek, had sparked a revolution of hearts that neither of them could have imagined. The standing ovation resumed with renewed vigor, filling the auditorium with its thunderous approval. The morning sun seemed to shine brighter through the windows, illuminating a stage where a humble janitor stood tall, finally seen, finally heard, finally respected for who he had been all along. The morning sun streamed through the gleaming glass walls of Worthington corporate towers, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Sam Carter adjusted his navy blue tie, a gift from Emma, and gripped his new leather briefcase. The weight of it still felt foreign in his hand, so different from the familiar wooden handle of his old mop. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," called out Jessica from reception, her smile genuine and warm. Just months ago, she'd barely glanced his way when he'd cleaned around her desk. "Morning, Jessica. How's Tommy doing with his math?" Sam asked, remembering the struggles she'd mentioned about her son. "So much better. Those tutoring tips you suggested really helped." She beamed at him, and Sam felt a flutter of pride in his chest. As he crossed the lobby toward the elevator, several employees nodded and waved. "Hey, Sam, loved your piece in the company newsletter," said Mark from accounting, falling into step beside him. "Really made me think about how we treat the cleaning staff." "That's exactly what I hoped it would do," Sam replied, pressing the elevator button. His new office was on the 15th floor, a far cry from the basement maintenance room where he'd spent so many years. Inside the elevator, Sam caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. The man staring back at him wore a well-fitted suit, but his eyes held the same humble warmth they always had. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and his posture was straighter now, unburdened by the weight of invisibility he'd carried for so long. The elevator doors opened, and Sam stepped into the bustling corridor. His new title, Director of Employee Well-Being, gleamed on the nameplate outside his office door. Inside, morning light spilled across his desk, where a stack of proposals awaited his review. Each one detailed ways to improve working conditions for the maintenance and support staff. Sam set down his briefcase and picked up a framed photo from his desk. It showed him and Emma at the community center, surrounded by smiling children from his poetry workshop. The program had expanded since his promotion, reaching more underprivileged kids than ever before. A knock at his door drew his attention. "Come in," he called out. Maria, one of the cleaning staff, entered tentatively. "Mr. Carter, do you have a moment?" "For you?" "Always. And please, it's still just Sam." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Maria sat down, wringing her hand slightly. "It's about the education program you started. My daughter, she wants to apply for the scholarship." Sam's face lit up. The program had been his first major initiative, a scholarship fund for employees' children, with special consideration for support staff families. "That's wonderful, Maria. I'd be happy to help her with the application." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. Before all this, I never thought college would be possible for her. But now. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You've given us hope, Sam." The words hit him hard, reminding him of his own journey. "Hope is powerful," he said softly. "Sometimes it just takes one person to believe in you." After Maria left, Sam worked through the morning, reviewing proposals and meeting with department heads. His afternoon included a sensitivity training session for executives, the same ones who had once mocked him. Now they listened intently as he spoke about dignity and respect in the workplace. As the day wound down, Sam received a text from Emma. "Park bench? Our usual spot at sunset?" He smiled, typing back a quick, "Yes." The late afternoon air was crisp as Sam walked through the park. Golden light filtered through the trees, and the first stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Emma was already there, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. "I saw Maria earlier," Emma said as Sam sat down beside her. "She told me about her daughter applying for the scholarship." Sam nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "It's amazing how things have changed. Sometimes I still can't believe it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. The park was quiet, except for the distant sound of children playing and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "I got another letter today," Sam said after a while, "from a janitor at another company. Said our story gave him courage to speak up about working conditions there." Emma smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "You're changing lives, Sam, not just here, but everywhere your story reaches." "All because you chose to see me," Sam whispered, his voice thick with gratitude as he watched the last sliver of sun disappear behind the trees. Emma turned to him, her expression soft but firm. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "All because you never stopped being who you are." They shared a smile as the first stars began to twinkle overhead, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of hope. Hope for tomorrow, hope for change, and hope for all the invisible heroes still waiting to be seen. The park bench where they sat was the same one where Emma had first heard Sam's poetry, where she had encouraged him to believe in himself. Now it stood as a testament to how far they'd come, and to the power of one simple act of kindness to transform not just a life, but an entire community. Sam looked out at the deepening twilight, feeling the weight of his new briefcase beside him, so different from his old mop, yet he carried it with the same dignity. In the gathering dusk, their smiles held all the warmth of the setting sun, filled with the quiet joy of knowing that sometimes the greatest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Samuel Sam Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.